Hi everybody and welcome to the Dog Classroom. I'm Amelia.
And I'm Anne-Marie.
And today we have a couple of visitors with us. We have Bee and Maui. So today we are going to be talking about a problem that I think a lot of people have, yes, and we refer to as counter surfing. I'm not sure that everybody quite knows what that means, but basically what we're talking about is when your dog steals things from the counter.
Right.
So, to get us started, why don't we talk about why dogs do that?
Well, I think, as some dogs get older, they realize that they can actually get to the counter.
Yes.
Right? Obviously, dogs know that there's food on there because their sense of smell is wonderful, mm-hmm, right? And we're sometimes a little less cautious.
We are.
We leave things there a lot.
This is a human-created issue, right?
Yes.
Dogs don't have counters. They don't understand the different surfaces that something is not for them versus something is for them.
Right.
So counter surfing or stealing food off the counter, or even just checking the counter repeatedly, is basically something that we have caused. And so we need to teach them other things to do.
Right, because if we honestly never left anything on the counter, it would never be an issue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when dogs are scavengers, so we encourage them to use their brains for things like enrichment games, and we give them appropriate outlets for it. Then
right,
they necessarily don't feel the need to go searching on counters as much.
Yeah.
But I think the first thing when we're dealing with counter surfing is management.
Yeah, for sure. The main thing of management is going to be if we're not in the kitchen, there's nothing on the counter. Yeah. Which I think is which is tricky for the human part.
Yep.
Right, with the owner, because sometimes all it takes is for us to turn her back. It depends on how food motivated, yeah, or smelly the thing is. Some owners honestly have said, well, they've never done it before, so they've left stuff, and then this is the one time,
yep,
the dog goes up and takes it. It's also a health issue, because there's been a lot of, yeah, butter, margarine eating.
Yeah, dogs, for whatever reason, like to eat butter, yep, but they might also eat other things that are not safe for them. So yep, it's something that we should address. When we're talking management, we're talking about preventing the issue from happening in the first place, right?
Right.
So we want to go to, okay, if I'm not in the kitchen, there's a gate up. Or if, yep, I'm not in the kitchen, my dog's not in there, I'm closing the gate, I'm doing something to keep them from going in there. If I'm not in the kitchen, the counters are clear.
Yeah.
And we don't decide what the dog finds exciting that they want to eat. The dog decides. So we might go, okay, I'm just going to leave the butter out. Who would eat a thing of butter?
Right.
Well, the dog decides that they want to eat a thing, yeah, of butter. So yeah, when I was dealing with this with Stark, when he was a puppy, he took everything off the counter because I was messy and I just left things out. And so I left like a bag of coffee grinds that he ate. Wow. Yeah, we had a few vet trips. We had, there was some medication that
Medication
he ate.
Is scary.
There was a blender with some like residue in it. Like there were things that were unsafe. Yeah, that I was like.
Because he could lick the blade?
Yeah. So I was leaving stuff out because I was lazy and I wasn't paying attention to it, and it was inconvenient for me to clean up after myself. So yeah, yeah, I have been there and I have dealt with it, and yeah, now we're at a place where if I accidentally leave my pizza on the coffee table and go have a shower, I have come back and it's still been there.
Oh, so, nice. Okay.
Yeah. It's like one of those times where you go, oh my gosh, that really worked. But it all started with, I had to be really diligent and go nothing on the counter. Yeah. Because once they try something and it's paid off, especially in a big way, like they find the butter, they find your steak that you were marinating, they found something they really liked, that's like jackpot. That's the biggest possible reward. Of course they're going to try and go back.
Yes.
So when he does, because inevitably we make mistakes, I'll leave the gate open, whatever. When he does go back and check, there's nothing there.
Right. So what Amelia's trying to say is she instilled management on herself.
On myself.
To make sure a little more tidying. But then because now then Amelia's talking to they're older and she can leave the pizza there, did the training to back up when the management was forgotten.
Because
right?
There's a little saying that management always fails, right? At some point, we are human, we make mistakes.
Yeah.
So managing or avoiding the problem forever is not enough. We need to manage and train.
Yeah.
So we can talk about some of the things that we have done to train. One of the biggest things I think was leave it. So teaching him that not everything is for him. Yeah. He is perpetually hungry, so he thinks everything is for him. But working on, okay, if I am actively in the kitchen, I will make sure that I'm ready to train and I am, cooking on the counter, whatever, making stuff. I'm going to ask him to leave it if he starts to go toward that counter.
Right.
Right? So if he starts to go forward, I'm asking him not to.
Okay.
And so I'm asking him to back away from the sink. Step one, right? I'm rewarding him for staying away. Nothing good is going to come from the counter.
So what Amelia's saying is the dog is being rewarded away from the counter.
Yes.
Okay, keep going.
So he doesn't need to get up on the counter to actually see what's going on. We've eliminated
because
that part.
Whatever is coming to him.
Yeah.
Yes.
So when we're actively in there, right, there are some dogs who, if you say turn your back to wash your hands in the sink or something, they're up there.
Yeah.
Right? Luckily, he was never that dog, but if that's the case, you also need to manage what they're doing in the kitchen, which maybe is a little bit more of an Alfie thing.
Yeah.
So what are some other things that they could do instead of following you around the kitchen if they might try to steal something? Right.
So my go-to is go to mat, go to box.
Go to box for Alfie.
Alfie sits in a box on the mat in the kitchen. Just because it has higher value. He's so food motivated that just sitting on the mat wasn't doing it. So he's done quite a lot better about getting into the box.
Yeah.
So he now sits in a box. But the idea is he's being rewarded away from the counter being in a thing. So I did create value for a thing.
Yeah.
Right? So over the counter. So same with, he's doing hand targets. Same with the mat. So I'm giving my dog something else to do instead of their want is just to take things. And I'm trying to say to them, if you're patient, something will come to you.
Yeah, the thing will come to you. You don't need to come steal it.
So I'm creating value for that mat in the kitchen instead of value for the counter.
Yeah, and that's actually like watching you right now. There's a bag of treats on the table and there's poodles hanging out and not stealing those treats. And that's just because they know through that history, these things are going to come to me. I don't need to go into that bag and steal them.
Right, so they're waiting for things to come to them. And actually, you guys can't see right now, but I am training Maui. He's laying down in a mat. So I am training him in the mat for staying there. And just like Amelia's saying, he's waiting for those things to come to you. Okay. So we've established that for a second.
Yes.
But here's the kicker.
Okay.
Okay. The dogs know when we're in the kitchen and when we're not.
Yes, they do.
Okay. So we have this relationship, we train it, then we run to the washroom, we come back, and it's gone.
Yeah.
So everybody's like, right, human error. Everybody's like, but I trained it. But the dog knows that
it applies when you're there.
It applies when you're there. So how would we possibly say go about training it when we're not there?
To me, that's two things. That's the go to mat and the stay.
Right.
So when you're saying, okay, stay, when we start with a stay, for example, we're not like walking to the bathroom and hoping that they stay. We're taking a little step back, we're coming forward again. We're taking 2 steps back, we're coming forward. So when I'm doing that, I'm going to train specifically the stay on its own, then the stay with the distraction of there's something on the counter.
Right.
So.
Right. And the other thing, the interesting thing too, is we're going to talk about this in the next episode, the 3 Ds, but distraction is huge because, you know, everybody says, why do they do so well in classes? I know I'm switching gears here for a second. And I say, well, why do you think? Well, there's a high rate of reinforcement. You are paying attention to that dog for the whole hour. So pretend to be distracted.
Yeah.
Be in the kitchen and just pretend to, you know, fuss with your phone, check the answering machine. Like Amelia's saying, go around the corner and come back, and reward the stay or the location, you know, then when you're not so much in the room, you're coming back and forth or you're distracted. That is huge, and that is where a lot of people miss. They assume if the dog is trained and won't do it when they're in there, they're automatically going to do it when the person isn't. You know what? Again, dogs are not given nearly enough credit for the intelligence, right? Because they pick up, we are so routine, right? They pick up on us and what we do as far as routine. It's hugely important to pretend to be distracted. Years ago, I was actually thinking it was almost like 9 years ago when I went to a conference outside Detroit there. Remember that one?
Yeah, that was 9 years ago.
Yeah, that was 9 years ago. And I did a lab with Frolic, and she sat perfectly still while people walked by until I acted distracted. And then as soon as I started fushing with my shoelace or something, she went and jumped on the person walking by.
She was also a baby at
I know,
that one. But.
I know, but it was a little bit of an aha moment, right?
And I'll have people, like in class, I'll say, okay, like if you are working your go-to-mat and you're at home, you're not sitting there with your treat pouch or your bag of treats and actively paying attention to your dog the entire time. You're watching TV, you're scrolling on your phone, you're doing something else. So I'm like, get out your phone and scroll. Sit on a chair beside your dog. And, you know,
multitask.
Even if you're just pretending, right? Because you want it to be sort of as similar as we can to real life. They know when it's a setup. Right? Because there are context clues, and dogs are very context specific. So if I have my treat pouch on in the kitchen, my dogs are going to be like, duh, of course I'm going to do everything that you say. But that's not, I don't walk around with a treat pouch on. So when I'm doing something in the kitchen, I'm going to set it up so it looks, you know, like maybe I have the dog treats on the counter and I'm picking them up and throwing it to them instead of making it this big setup where they see that we're obviously in a training scenario. It's not real life. Because the other thing, like with Nuggie too, for example, my Chihuahua mix, she will do things with other people, new people, that she does not do with me. So when somebody is eating, she can't counter serve, right? So she politely asks by, I call it punching, snorting, and
looking like she's never been fed before in her life.
So she tries those things, and so I can't, like, I have to do setups in order to train, right? So I'm like, okay, we're gonna put her mat out and we're gonna practice go to mat when I have guests over and whatever. And it is a little bit of a setup, but it works in that it puts her in the real life situation and we can train through it. Like if I'm just by myself and I'm eating, she doesn't go to mat because she doesn't bother me. But if I have people over, then I pull the mat out.
Because she's used to that situation. But as soon as someone else comes over, you go somewhere else, you honestly you've changed the dynamics.
And so I think it's important to teach the skills, but also teach them in different scenarios where, you know, because counter surfing, we think of just the kitchen counter, but it's also the coffee table. It's also straight out of the baby's hand. It's also, it's wherever they can grab something from. So we need to teach the different skills that we're doing and practice in those situations.
Right. So the idea with the counter surfing is, you know, even though you've trained it, I guess there's some situations where don't assume, don't necessarily put the dog at fault, because I don't think that's fair. First of all, they're a dog.
They're a dog. We invited them into our house.
Right. They're a dog. We have to learn to compromise and coexist. We also have to realize that, like Amelia said, they're scavengers. They look for food. It entices them. So you have to be aware of that. So the tricky thing, again, is if I have burgers on the counter defrosting, am I going to walk away outside for 5 minutes and leave 5 dogs in the house with raw burgers on the counter? No.
You might not come back to your burgers.
So I'm going to grab them, throw them in the oven. I'm going to grab them, put them in the pantry or the fridge.
So we're talking about management again, but we're talking about more temporary. So, just thinking a few steps ahead of, okay, I'm not going to try to go have a shower while my pizza's on the table. That might have been a good thing to think about.
Right. But I'm not going to set my dogs up for failure.
Exactly.
And almost, I don't want to say over trust, because, the funny thing is, let's compare it to kids. Ben buys Persians and leaves them out on the counter. Who goes and eats one?
Maya. Yes.
Right?
Your human child is counter surfing.
There you go. But you know what I mean? Like, she just assumes, and maybe she should ask her brother because she bought them. But the same scenario, like, it's out there and it's enticing and she likes it. So is she going to wait for her brother to come home and ask?
Yeah.
So you know what? Honestly, it happens.
It happens with us too.
It happens with us too. Or, somebody puts out, the chocolate cake and then there's a little lick of the icing. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's little things to that too. So we can't just be like, oh my gosh, they should know better.
Yeah.
I think we just really need to focus on the situation, honestly, that we're putting them in. One other little thing I want to mention before we summarize. With the counter surfing is I want to talk about frolic for a second.
Yes.
Yeah.
When there's something behind it.
Right. Because over the years and having dogs, unfortunately, I've lost a few dogs young, right? We won't get into that. But, Frolic's one of the few older dogs I've had. So she's 10 now. Stark's what?
Almost 13.
Almost 13. I still think of him as like 11 or 12. I'm losing a year in there. But I'm starting, I don't want to say I'm learning more, but I am about geriatric dogs.
Yeah.
Because you can, again, read and so forth. But now, the joke is I have more senior dogs than I necessarily have younger dogs. I have the 2 younger dogs with me here today. But 2 years ago, she started counter surfing.
Yeah, when she hadn't for her whole life.
When she hadn't for her whole life. We came home, we had left, okay, so this is probably my bad. We had left a salmon defrosting, and it wasn't in the middle of the counter, it was off to the side, and then we had a closed container of like peanut butter squares or something. So we came home, the squares were off of the counter, opened. Gone. Quite the combination. And then the salmon was missing as well. And it was her and Tulip were out. So we know Tulip can't get on the counter.
Yeah, the 12.
So we knew for sure it was Frolic. And it was just mind blowing in a way that a dog who never had done anything like that or showed interest to all of a sudden have that need. So there's me, right? Vet tech. Did blood work. Just concerned about it.
Yeah.
Checked hypothyroid, but I believe it's now a cognitive issue. And the more I talk to older dog owners, some of them have actually had the same reaction where they're almost more frantic to eat, or like just more fixated on the food. And I do find that over time, like she started begging more or being really pushy, like you said, when other people come. If we do a bit of trick training or something, like she's pushing in, like she's focused, she's darting on that. So I just wanted to bring that up because there can also be changes, medical issues, medical changes, and I call it cognitive with Frolic. Changes. So that's just a little bit of note to self on the side if anyone's experiencing with their older dog. You know, can't quite explain it, but what I did was go back to leave-its, go to mats. Mm-hmm. The other thing, added management. So she is now put in a bedroom.
Yeah.
Because I don't need her to get sick. Right? The other joke a little bit is training the other people in the household to now get things off the counters, which is proving to be a bit of an issue. So the thing, what I do is if she is left out, there is nothing on the counter, everything is in the pantry, in the fridge, in a cupboard. Yeah. Locked up.
So you're choosing, because of her age and because of the possible changes that she's gone through, to do a lot of extra management in addition to your training, which I think is fair, and I think a lot of people wouldn't even think about because they're just going, oh, the dog's being bad. But if your dog at 9 or 10 years old suddenly develops a new behavior that they've never done before, maybe that's worth checking into. The other thing that we talk about with counter surfing is the amount of time. So if you train your dog, when we do leave-its, for example, we train our dog to leave it for 1 second and then 5 seconds and 3 seconds. If we don't do that same thing, you know, in the house, so let's say we have one of those dogs who's gonna steal, if we turn our back to wash our hands, we need to start with, I'm gonna pretend to turn around and wash my hands, reward the dog. I'm gonna actually wash my hands, reward the dog. And working those scenarios, I'm not saying that it's reasonable to go, okay, I'm gonna leave the house for 2 hours with the salmon on the counter. Maybe that's just something where you choose management, but we can work through some of those challenges where the dog isn't just taking the first opportunity they can to go and steal.
So what it is that we're trying to express to people, it's a combination of both. Yeah. It's a combination of management expectations, and it's the other is training. Yeah. And by no means is this all on the dog whatsoever.
Yeah, well, this is on human.
This is on human expectations and just assuming. The other thing is, I tell people, is you can't train when you're not home.
Yes.
So if you're worried about something or concerned, honestly, it takes me 2 extra minutes to put stuff away. The other thing is, starting to wrap up a bit here, is they can get pancreatitis, and they have, from eating tubs of margarine, right? They can get wicked diarrhea, vomiting from eating raw meat, E. coli poisoning, right? Like, there's like thing after thing. So we just have to remember they're dogs, right? And that's why we love them and appreciate them, because they have that innocence. So it's not, don't set them up for failure, and just be aware of sometimes, we have to tweak things.
Yeah. Okay, so I think overall, if we're having issues with counter surfing, it's a good idea to train. It's a good idea to train ourselves. And the dog.
Take some of the onus of the behavior onto us. It's not just the dog's fault. It's the human. Because again, we have clients tell us that, and we sort of just look at them, and the owner's like, I shouldn't have left it there. I'm like, okay, so how are we going to move forward? Okay, so keep going.
So just summarizing a little bit, making sure that we set them up for success by managing the environment. So that means if you have a young puppy, if you have a dog who's the type to just start and steal anything when you turn your back, they can't be in the kitchen when you're not actively in the kitchen working with them. We can't necessarily just teach them, leave it and then hope for the best. We might have to go to mat. We might have to implement some other tricks to help them stay away.
One thing I'm going to add to leave it, and I was discussing this in class this week, different values of food.
Yes, because if you only ever do kibble, then they're not going to learn to leave cheese or steak.
Right, they're going to go for the steak, absolutely. And that's what I say. You want to train different values, because you never know when they'll get to the counter or the garbage can.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm good.
And then, it's something that we can work through, but it involves sort of both ends of that relationship, where the dog can learn some things and we can learn some things, and then we can find a solution for our counter surfing.
And usually, and the thing with when you introduce something new to yourself, what you're doing is now adapting a new habit or way of doing things, which people don't necessarily love change. Dogs accept change, I think, a lot easier than people do. But the thing is now, like I said, before I leave the house, if I'm gonna leave Frolic out, I make sure the counters are clear.
Yeah.
You know, and that's just something I've adapted to. That's something I've tried to get my family to adapt to. And that's tricky. You know, I'm the one doing it, but I also live with other people.
Yeah.
So if they're not necessarily doing it, that's why we've made the rule that the dog's in the bedroom, because I don't want her to get sick or anything to happen at that point. So that's a choice there. But we're just, you know, take a step back, evaluate the situation, and create a training plan.
Yeah, that works for you and your household.
Management plan. Do you need a gate? Do you not need a gate? Where's the dog gonna go? If you're in a super rush, then put up a gate that day and don't allow the dog in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Right? But the thing is just those little things, and even, you know, we get busy and people can be parents as well. We did the same thing with children.
Yeah.
Things that they weren't, you know, like, do you want your kid eating a bunch of cookies before dinner? Well, if you leave them on the counter, the second you go to the washroom, the little kiddo's got the cookie in their mouth. So why even leave them out? Put them away.
Yeah.
Right? So it sort of works both ways. So that was good.
Yeah, so thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the Dog Classroom Podcast.
Thank you.